They say the tower at St. Mark's Episcopal Church isn't empty. On quiet nights in Cheyenne, Wyoming, when the streets go still and the last lights go out, people swear they hear it. The hammering inside the bell tower, a slow, steady rhythm, not frantic, not random, purposeful. A man at work, long after the job should have been finished. I used to laugh. A church haunted by a mason trapped in its walls? Ghost tour stuff. Beer story stuff. Not something you actually experience. That was before the night I stayed behind in the church. Before the night, I pressed my ear to the stone wall of the tower and heard someone breathing on the other side. I grew up in Cheyenne, and St. Mark's was just a landmark to me. A gray Gothic sentinel with a bell tower that looks older than the wind. My grandmother called the tower cursed, but she never said why. The story locals tell starts in 1886, when 2 Swedish immigrant stonemasons were hired to raise the tower. They set ashlar limestone block by block, hands raw from lime burn, mortar still green, chisels ringing. One day, one of the men fell. Some say he slipped. Others whisper his partner gave the push. Either way, he died where he landed. The survivor panicked. He was poor, foreign, and sure that blame would fall on him. Instead of reporting the death, he did the unthinkable. He hid the body in the unfinished wall, bricked him in, sealed him like a course of stone. Then he went back to work, covering his crime under a neat face of limestone. After that, construction faltered. Delays, accidents. By the time the tower was done, the talk had already spread. There's a man entombed in there, and he doesn't rest easy. History books don't mention any of it. Old clippings talk about setbacks and injuries, but no names. Locals will tell you the truth, though. They'll tell you about the hammering, the whispers, the shadow in the tower windows at dusk that steps back into the stone. And I told myself what I told everyone else. It's folklore, nothing to fear. Until I heard it. It happened last winter. I'd been helping with maintenance at St. Mark's. Odd jobs, patchwork, whatever the custodian needed. One evening, I stayed late to clean up after a community event. Nothing unusual. By the time I finished, everyone was gone. The sanctuary was empty. The lights were low. Outside, wind pushed snow across the street in long white ribbons. I should have left. But as I passed the base of the bell tower, I stopped, not on purpose. I just paused. The stone looked darker there. The air was colder. And in that silence, I heard something. So faint I could have blamed the wind, but it was too steady, too precise, metronomic, about a slow heartbeat. I froze. The sound was coming from inside the wall. I stepped closer and laid my hand on the stone. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then I thought I heard a whisper buried in the wall, like a moth behind glass. Not loud, not clear. A single word. Maybe a name. It sounded like mine. I jerked back, and my sleeve scraped the stone. A pale grit dusted my coat, fresh limestone dust, dry where the wall shouldn't be shedding. At ear height, the face of the block showed a faint smear in the mortar joint, damp as if someone had just pressed against it from the other side. I staggered a step, legs weak. My rational brain barked, "You're overtired. You're imagining things." But I know what stone does and doesn't do. I've worked in construction, framing crews, renovations. A wall doesn't whisper. It doesn't breathe. I circled the tower, straining to hear. Nothing. Just the building settling and the wind at the stained glass. Still, I went back to the same spot, leaned in, and pressed my ear flat against the wall. No tapping this time. a faint scrape of metal against stone. Slow, methodical, then a long exhale, as if someone had leaned their face against the same wall, their breath seeping through the limestone to meet mine. A prickle bloomed where my ear had touched the mortar, a hot, chalky sting. Lime. It bites the skin a few minutes after you get some on you. I wiped at it and came away with white on my fingers. Then the hammering returned. Nearer. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. The exact cadence we use to set and sink is 3 to place the nail and 2 to drive it home. My heart started to sink with it. 3, 2, 3, 2. The sound had learned my rhythm, or I'd learned its. I stood so fast, I made the pews creak. The church was empty, but I felt watched, like the stone had eyes. That's when a thought hit me that I can't shake. I wasn't sure who I was hearing. The man who fell? The man who sealed him in? Or something the tower had become when it swallowed them both? Stone keeps what you give it. And worse, what if it wanted one more set of hands? I didn't stay much longer. I grabbed my coat and left. The echo of that breath followed me to the door, like that moth behind glass, fluttering where it shouldn't exist. A few days later, I mentioned it to the custodian. He didn't laugh. He didn't even look surprised. He just said, "You heard it, didn't you? Everyone does. Eventually." He told me contractors have walked off jobs after hearing hammering in the tower. Carpenters catch it best, he said. Men who know the language of tools, who can tell the difference between random noise and work. Sometimes, during renovations, the noises stop completely, as if someone inside is listening, waiting. Parishioners still report whispers during late-night prayers, a voice that doesn't sound like theirs, a name that doesn't belong in their thoughts. Weeks later, I caught myself drumming that same pattern on my kitchen counter without thinking. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. My fingers, my cadence. I pulled my hand away like I'd touched a hot stove. It left a ghost of a rhythm in the air. I used to think the tower was just stone, cold, lifeless. I don't anymore. It breathes. It remembers. And when the night is quiet enough, you can hear it working. Some say it's the spirit of the man bricked inside, still clawing to get out. Others insist it's the guilt of the one who did the sealing, trapped in an eternal shift, hammering in the dark. I don't know which is worse, but I do know this. On some nights, if you walk past St. Mark's, you'll hear it for yourself. The sound of a hammer on stone, a heartbeat in the wall. Not a warning, not a plea. Just a worker who never laid down his tools, and never will. Some churches feel alive with faith. St. Michael's only ever felt alive with grief. That was my first thought, stepping into St. Michael's Church in Charleston after dark. I'd read about the place before, an anchor in the city since 1761, its bells ringing through centuries of war, hurricanes, and yellow fever epidemics. A church with history thicker than its stone walls. But one story always stuck out. One of Charleston's most famous ghost stories, the bride of St. Michael's, Harriet Mackey. She was supposed to be married in the mid-1800s, the kind of young woman whose future seemed carved in light. But Charleston was crawling with yellow fever, and the night before her wedding, she fell sick. By morning, she was gone. People say her ghost never left St. Michael's, that she appears in her wedding dress, wandering the pews, drifting down the aisle. A wedding that never happened, rehearsed again and again in the afterlife. Of course, it's one thing to read a story. It's another to sit alone inside that church at midnight, the air heavy and still. Maybe I came here out of curiosity, Maybe I came here for something else. There are times in life when plans fall apart, when the future you thought you had gets ripped away. And Harriet's story, well, it hit closer than I wanted to admit. So there I was, in a pew near the back. My flashlight was off, just the faint glow of street lamps through the high windows. The wood creaked under me like an old man shifting in his sleep. And I waited. For what? I wasn't sure. But in a place like St. Michael's, waiting feels dangerous. At first, it was nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing echoing in the rafters. Then I heard it, a faint dragging sound, like fabric brushing across stone. I told myself it was nothing. The church was old. A draft could shift things. Mice in the walls, maybe. But the sound kept coming. Not random, deliberate. I sat up straighter, ears straining. My skin prickled. And then something changed in the air. The candles at the altar trembled, their flames shivering though the windows were sealed tight. A faint perfume floated past, sweet, unmistakable. Lilies. Flowers for funerals, flowers for weddings. My mouth went dry. The sound came again, closer this time. A long, deliberate brush of fabric, and that's when I saw it. Near the back of the church, a shimmer. Not light exactly, more like the air itself bending, pulling into something that didn't belong. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, looked again. Still there, a blur, a suggestion of a figure where no one should be. I told myself to move, to leave, but the church seemed to hold me still, like the pews had grown hands around my shoulders, and the shimmer began to move. The bride of St. Michael's. Her gown was pale, almost glowing, lace trailing across the stone floor. Her veil hung low, hiding her face, her features smudged like a painting blurred by water. She wasn't clear, wasn't solid, but there was no mistaking her. She stood at the far end of the aisle, the very aisle she should have walked as a bride. But instead of joy, she carried sorrow. It radiated from her like heat, heavy, suffocating. And I felt it, because I knew what it was like to lose a future before it began. She glided forward, silent, except for the faint drag of her gown, and as she moved, the church shifted. Pews groaned, as if invisible guests pressed down into them. I swear I heard faint whispers, dozens of voices murmuring in anticipation. Then the organ gave a sound, not music exactly, just a wheeze of air, broken, like something long dead trying to breathe again. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Half of me wanted to bolt, to run into the night. The other half felt pulled, rooted, as though this moment had been waiting centuries for her, for me. She raised her hand slightly, delicate, beckoning, and I knew she wanted me to stand. My whole body felt heavy, but at the same time, I was rising. Like gravity had shifted, urging me forward. I took one step into the aisle. Her hand was still raised, waiting. The whispers grew louder, clearer, curling inside my head. Promises that I wouldn't be alone, that she understood, that she had been waiting. And the terrifying part? It felt good, comforting. Her veil trembled, and for the first time, I thought I saw her face. Just a flash, sunken eyes, yellowed skin, fever's ruin beneath the lace. But then it shifted back, soft, blurred, innocent. My chest tightened. Was she showing me what she had been or what she had become? Another step. My hand lifted without my permission, fingers reaching. The air around her was ice. I could feel it already, like touching her would drain the warmth out of me. But still, my hand kept moving, closer, closer. And then the bell outside tolled once, heavy and sharp. Midnight. The sound ripped through the church like a blade, and just like that, she was gone. The aisle was empty. The pews are silent. No perfume, no whispers, nothing. Just me, hand still outstretched in the cold. I stumbled out into the Charleston night, legs shaking. The city was alive with noise, horses on cobblestone, laughter from late-night bars, and the hum of modern life. But it all felt wrong. After the silence of that church, I looked at my hand. I swear it was colder than the rest of me, like something had brushed against it, and then I smelled it again. Lilies. Just faint, carried on the air, gone, before I could be sure. I don't know what I believe. People argue about the supernatural, about ghost stories versus true stories, about what's real and what's just imagination. All I know is, in that church, I felt her grief as if it were mine. And part of me wonders if she saw mine as if it were hers. That's the danger of St. Michael's. It doesn't just hold history. It holds sorrow, and sorrow looks for company. If you ever visit, take this advice. Don't look down the aisle, because if she's there, she'll already be looking at you. If you ever hear someone talk about haunted church stories in South Carolina, they almost always mention Salem Black River Presbyterian. People say it's one of the creepiest churches in the state, but the real danger isn't the church itself, it's what sits behind it. A shack that, if you believe the stories, was home to a grieving preacher who lost everything and maybe never left. The locals warned me never to go behind Salem Black River Presbyterian, but I didn't listen. One night, I was scrolling through ghost forums on my laptop. That's when I found it. A post about Salem Black River Presbyterian Church in Sumter County. The church kept popping up on lists of haunted church stories in South Carolina. The post claimed that if you went behind the church at night, you could see a light glowing from inside a shack, where a preacher once wasted away after his family died from plague. 2 weeks later, I was driving down a narrow road, lined with pine trees, the moon barely visible through the branches. The closer I got, the quieter it felt. Even the frogs and crickets seemed to fall silent as I turned onto Black River Road. The church appeared suddenly, like it had been waiting for me. Salem Black River Presbyterian is old, with 1840s brickwork, tall white columns at the front, and windows that look like blind eyes staring into the night. I parked on the shoulder of the road, headlights sweeping over the old cemetery. The gravestones leaned at odd angles, some so eroded you could barely read the names. A few had been broken, lying in the dirt. As I walked closer, the air felt thicker. It wasn't just the summer heat. It was like the place had its own atmosphere, heavy and watchful. I passed the church doors, chained shut with a rusty lock. Someone had spray-painted symbols across the wood, faded pentagrams and numbers, reminders of when vandals had turned the place into a playground for the occult. It felt like something straight out of one of those creepy stories. I wandered into the cemetery first. My flashlight swept across rows of graves, some dating back to the 1700s. That's when I froze. It was faint, like a child's laugh, carried on the wind. But when I turned, there was nothing. Just rows of old stones and black trees stretching into the distance. Trying to shake it off, I kept moving. Then I noticed something odd. A bouquet of flowers resting on a grave that appeared to be nearly 2 centuries old. The flowers were fresh, too fresh. I thought to myself, who leaves flowers at a grave this old? As I circled behind the church, the trees closed in around me, and that's when I saw it. The shack. It was smaller than I expected, more of a cabin, sagging under its own weight. The roof was warped, the door half rotted, and one cracked window stared at us like an unblinking eye. I should have turned back right then, but curiosity has a way of pulling you past your better judgment. The shack looked abandoned, but the ground told a different story. The grass around it was pressed flat, as if someone or something had been walking circles around it. As I stepped closer, something flickered in the window. At first, I thought it was my flashlight reflecting, but no, this was a glow from inside. A candle. I froze. For a moment, I thought I saw someone or something in the shack, but the shack was supposed to be abandoned. I pulled out my phone to record, but the screen froze. Then the battery dropped from 75% to 0, shutting off completely. That was when the coughing started. Low, ragged, like lungs full of dust. It came from inside the shack. Against all logic, I opened the door. The air inside was damp, choking with mildew. Dust floated in the beams of my flashlight. There wasn't much inside. A single wooden chair in the corner. A Bible on the floor. Pages warped and yellow, and burn marks along the wall. The candle on the windowsill flickered, though there was no draft. And then came the coughing again, this time directly behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. The candle blew out. Darkness surrounded me. I bolted out the door, crashing through the brush. I swear I could still hear coughing behind me, following me step for step. I reached the car, heart pounding. I jammed the key into the ignition. Nothing. The engine coughed once, then died. Then came the knocking. 3 loud thuds against a trunk. The knocking came again, louder. I turned the key one more time, and finally the engine roared to life. Gravel spat behind me as I floored it, the church vanishing in the rearview mirror. Later that night, I managed to power my phone back on. I checked the video. It had only recorded 2 seconds before dying. But in that short clip, the shack's window was visible, and in the glass, clear as day, was the face of a man, pale, hollow eyes, staring straight at the camera. I ended the video there because honestly, I couldn't watch it again. They say Salem Black River has more than its share of haunted church stories. And now, I believe it, because I've seen the shack, and I know I wasn't alone out there.